The Duke's triplets were dying, until the poor Maid did the unthinkable. The Duke's triplets had 3 weeks to live. Every healer said so. Then a 7-year-old debt slave walked into that cursed nursery, and within minutes, the children who'd been screaming for 3 years went silent in her arms. What the Duke saw next made him question everything: his dead wife's hidden letter, a forbidden blood ritual, and the truth that someone inside his own house had been poisoning his children since birth. Nerissa was worth exactly 3 silver coins, until the night she performed a forbidden ritual that drained the poison from 3 dying children into her own veins. The Duke found her collapsed on the nursery floor, the triplets breathing freely for the first time in their lives, and a vial of the same toxin that killed his wife hidden in the medicine cabinet. Someone in the household was still trying to finish the job. Hello, everyone. Before we dive into tonight's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our story. Nerissa stopped believing in rescue the day her father counted her worth in silver coins. She once believed her life might still turn towards something gentle, that perhaps hardship was just a chapter, not a sentence. But on the day her family's debts finally swallowed them whole, Nerissa learned the truth. Some lives are not meant to be rescued. Some girls are born to be traded. The debt collector arrived before sunrise. His boots shook the rotting floorboards of their cottage, each step deliberate, each creak a countdown. Nerissa stood frozen behind her mother's chair, hands trembling against the splintered wood, watching her father offer apology after apology, promises of repayment he could never give. It didn't matter. The collector's voice boomed with cold finality. 3 silver coins by sundown, or the girl leaves with us. Nerissa's breath caught. Her mother didn't argue. Her father didn't fight. No one said her name. She wanted to scream, to demand they look at her, acknowledge her, fight for her, but shame choked the words in her throat. Because deep down, she'd always known this moment would come. Her family had been drowning in debt for years. 3 bad harvests. Her father's broken leg never healed. Her mother's cough wouldn't stop. And Nerissa, 17, uneducated, with no dowry and no prospects, had always been the only thing of value they had left to sell. The collector didn't wait for tears. Come, girl. Her mother finally turned, eyes red but dry. She pressed a folded cloth into Nerissa's hands, her grandmother's threadbare shawl, the only heirloom they owned. Be good, her mother whispered. Do what they say. Not I love you. Not I'm sorry. Just obey. Nerissa nodded, numb, and followed the collector into the early morning fog. The auction hall smelled of sweat, smoke, and desperation. Nerissa was marched onto a raised platform alongside a dozen other girls, some younger, some older, all hollow-eyed and silent. Buyers circled like vultures, muttering assessments as if the girls were livestock. Too thin. Bad teeth. No education. What use is she? Nerissa kept her eyes down, willing herself invisible. But invisibility was a privilege she no longer had. A man in a fine coat grabbed her wrist, twisting it to inspect her hands. Calluses. She's worked. Field labor, the auctioneer confirmed. Strong enough for kitchen or laundry. The man grunted, unimpressed, and moved on. Nerissa exhaled shakily until she heard the whisper that made her blood freeze. She's being taken to the Silent Duke. For the cursed triplets. A ripple of fear swept through the crowd. Even the hardened buyers, men who trafficked in human lives, looked away. No healer survived that post, one muttered. They die within weeks, said another. Those children, whatever they are, they swallow every light in that estate. Nerissa's heart was hammered. She'd heard the stories everyone in Varnemeyer had. Duke Cashin Valor. The Silent Duke. A war hero turned recluse after his wife died in childbirth, leaving behind triplets no one had ever seen. Rumor claimed the children were cursed, that they aged too slowly, that their eyes glowed in the dark, that nurses and healers hired to care for them vanished. Some fled, some went mad, and some were found dead in their beds with no mark upon them. No one knew the truth, but everyone feared it. The Duke did not come to the auction himself. He sent a carriage painted in the house colors of mourning, black and gray, and a messenger who did not bother to meet Nerissa's eyes. No explanation. No promise of wages. No reassurance. Only an instruction, delivered in a flat, indifferent tone. Keep the triplets cleaned and fed until they pass. That is all. Until they pass. Not heal them. Not care for them. Until they die. That was her purpose. Not a healer. Not a caregiver. A witness to their deaths. The messenger handed the auctioneer a small leather purse. 3 silver coins clinked inside, and gestured curtly toward Nerissa. Come. She climbed into the carriage on legs that felt like water. The road to Valor Estates stretched long and silent. Nerissa pressed her face to the carriage window, watching the world she knew fade into the distance. Her village, the fields she'd worked, the river where she used to dream of running away. But running had never been an option. And now it never would be. The estate loomed ahead like a shadow carved from stone. Tall, iron gates. Towers that disappeared into the mist. Gardens overgrown with thorns. It looked less like a home and more like a mausoleum. The carriage stopped. The messenger opened the door. Follow me. Nerissa stepped onto the gravel path, clutching her grandmother's shawl like a lifeline. The air here felt heavier, colder, as if the estate itself was holding its breath. Inside, the halls were vast and silent. No servants bustled. No voices echoed. Only the sound of her footsteps and the messenger's boots against marble. They stopped before a heavy wooden door. The messenger knocked once, then pushed it open. The new caretaker has arrived. Nerissa stepped inside and froze. The room was dim, lit only by a dying fire. And in the center, on a massive bed, lay 3 small figures. Children, pale as porcelain, still as death. Their chests barely rose and fell. And standing beside them, silhouetted against the firelight, was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, draped in black. He did not turn, but his voice, low and rough as gravel, sent a shiver down her spine. You will not save them. No one can. But you'll stay until the end. Nerissa's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. So she simply nodded and stepped forward into the darkness. The estate did not feel like a home. It felt like a crypt. Nerissa followed the messenger through corridors that stretched endlessly in every direction, stone walls bare of decoration, windows tall and narrow like arrow slits, floors so polished they reflected nothing but shadow. The air itself seemed to resist her presence, cold and heavy, pressing against her chest with every step. No voices echoed through the halls. No footsteps but their own. No warmth. Just silence. And the faint, distant sound of wind battering the towers above. The messenger stopped at a junction where a narrow staircase spiraled upward into darkness. He gestured sharply. Wait here. Then he disappeared down another hall, leaving Nerissa alone. She wrapped her grandmother's shawl tighter around her shoulders, suddenly aware of how small she was in this place. How unwanted. A door creaked open somewhere behind her. Nerissa turned and froze. A woman stood in the doorway, middle-aged and gaunt, her servant's uniform crisp but her face worn thin with exhaustion. She stared at Nerissa with an expression that made her stomach drop. Not anger. Not curiosity. Pity. You're the new one, the woman said quietly. Nerissa nodded, unsure what else to do. The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. How old are you? 17. A flicker of something, grief, maybe regret, crossed the woman's face. She glanced down the hall, then stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. Listen to me, girl. If you have any way to leave this place, any family, any coin hidden away, use it. Tonight. Before they take you upstairs. Nerissa's heart stuttered. I don't understand. The children, the woman hissed. They're not right. The Duchess died screaming when she birthed them. Screaming words no one could understand. And the triplets, she shuddered. They don't cry like normal babies. They wail, like something's tearing them apart from the inside. The healers who've tried to help them, some fled. Some went mad. One was found dead in her bed, no mark on her, just gone. Nerissa's mouth went dry. And the Duke, the woman continued, her voice cracking. He doesn't care. He's given up. He just watches them die. Slowly. And anyone who gets close. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. The woman's face went pale. She stepped back quickly, her voice turning flat and formal. The Duke will see you now. Then she fled. Nerissa was led to a study at the end of a long, drafty corridor. The door was heavy oak, carved with a Valor crest, a falcon clutching a broken sword. The messenger knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for a response. The caretaker, Your Grace. He stepped aside. Nerissa hesitated, then forced herself forward. The study was vast and cold. Shelves of books lined the walls, though none looked recently touched. A fire burned low in the hearth, barely enough to cast light. And standing beside the window, silhouetted against the gray sky, was a man. Duke Cassian Valor. He did not turn to look at her. He simply stood, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the storm-lashed grounds, as if she didn't exist. Nerissa swallowed hard. She'd heard stories of the Duke, how he'd led Varnamire's armies to victory, how he'd been feared and respected in equal measure. But she'd also heard the other stories. The ones whispered in kitchens and taverns. He loved his wife so deeply that when she died, he buried his heart with her. He doesn't speak anymore. Not really. Just commands. He's waiting for his children to die so he can follow. The silence stretched. Finally, without turning, the Duke spoke. His voice was low, rough, empty. You were told your duties. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Grace, Nerissa managed. You will feed them, bathe them, keep them comfortable. A pause. You will not attempt to heal them. You will not call for physicians. You will not pray over them or perform rituals or try any folk remedy you think might help. Each word landed like a stone. Do you understand? Nerissa's throat tightened. But if there's a chance. There is no chance. The Duke finally turned, and Nerissa's breath caught. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, perhaps less, but he looked like a man decades older. His face was sharp and cold, carved from exhaustion and grief. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His jaw was set in a hard, unyielding line. He wore black from neck to boots, no ornament, no color. He looked like a man attending his own funeral. And when his eyes met hers, pale gray, flat and lifeless, Nerissa felt the last fragile remnants of fairy tales crumble to dust. There was no prince here, only a ghost. You will stay with them until the end, he said quietly. However long that takes. And when it's over, you will be paid and released. That is all I require of you, Your Grace. Do not, he interrupted, his voice hardening, grow attached. Do not hope. Do not believe you are different from the others. He stepped closer, and Nerissa forced herself not to flinch. You are here because you were cheap, nothing more. When you leave, alive or dead, you will be replaced, just like the others. His words struck like a slap. Nerissa wanted to argue, to rage, to demand why he'd given up on his own children. But she was a servant now, a purchased thing. So she lowered her eyes and whispered, Yes, Your Grace. He studied her for a long moment, then turned back to the window. Take her upstairs. The nursery was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a hallway that smelled faintly of herbs and sickness. The servant who led her there, a young man with haunted eyes, stopped outside the door and handed her a ring of keys. You'll need these, he muttered, for the medicine cabinet. Not that it matters. What do you mean? He glanced at the door, then back at her. They don't take medicine. They don't eat. They just waste away. His voice dropped. And they scream. Every night. Like they're being torn apart. Nerissa's hands trembled as she took the keys. The servant left without another word. She stood alone in the dim hallway, staring at the heavy door. Behind it, she heard nothing. No crying. No movement. Just silence. She took a breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room was suffocatingly warm. A fire roared in the hearth, and thick curtains blocked out the last of the gray daylight. The air smelled of sweat and something else, something faintly sweet and wrong, like fruit left too long to rot. And in the center of the room, in a massive canopied bed, lay three small figures. The triplets. Nerissa's heart clenched. They were so small. No more than 3 years old, if that. Their skin was pale, too pale and slick with fever. Their breathing was shallow and uneven, chests rising and falling in stuttering rhythm. One of them whimpered softly. Nerissa stepped closer. The first child, a boy with dark curls plastered to his forehead, twisted beneath the blankets, his face scrunched in pain. The second, a girl with silver blonde hair, lay perfectly still, her lips parted as if gasping for air that wouldn't come. The third boy clutched a small wooden toy, his knuckles white, his body trembling. They looked like they were dying.
And no one was helping them.
Nerissa's chest tightened with something she couldn't name: anger, grief, defiance. She didn't care what the Duke said. She didn't care what the servants whispered. These were children. She knelt beside the bed and reached out, gently brushing the dark-haired boy's forehead. He flinched, and then went still. Nerissa froze. The boy's breathing slowed, deepened. The trembling in his limbs eased. She glanced at the other two. The girl's gasping breaths evened out. The third boy's grip on the toy loosened, his body relaxing into the mattress. All three of them calmed. Nerissa's heart pounded.
What?
A voice spoke from the doorway, low and sharp. What exactly are you?
She spun around.
Duke Cashin stood in the threshold, his eyes locked on her hand, still resting on his son's forehead. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried something Nerissa hadn't heard before: suspicion. And beneath it, faint, barely there, hope. Nerissa didn't sleep the first night. She sat beside the triplets' bed, watching their small chests rise and fall, terrified that if she looked away, even for a moment, they would stop breathing entirely. But they didn't. In fact, as the hours passed, something impossible happened. They improved. The dark-haired boy, Aster, she'd learned from the nameplate on the cradle, stopped thrashing in his sleep. His fever broke sometime near midnight, his skin cooling beneath her palm. The girl, Celine, began breathing deeply, evenly, her tiny fists unclenching. And the third boy, Vero, released the wooden toy he'd been clutching and curled toward Nerissa's hand like a flower seeking sunlight. By dawn, all three were sleeping peacefully. For the first time in months, according to the servants, the nursery was silent. No screaming, no wailing, no desperate, rattling breaths. Just peace. And Nerissa had no idea why. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and wonder. Nerissa tended the children from sunrise to long past dark, changing their clothes, coaxing broth past their lips, bathing their fevered skin with cool water. Tasks she'd been told were pointless. Tasks every other caretaker had abandoned in despair. But the triplets didn't fight her. They reached for her. When she entered the room each morning, Aster's eyes would flutter open and fix on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Celine would whimper softly until Nerissa picked her up, then settle against her chest with a sigh. And Vero, silent, watchful Vero, would grip her sleeve and refuse to let go. It was as if they recognized her, as if they'd been waiting for her. "Rissa," Aster whispered one afternoon, his voice hoarse and small. Nerissa froze, a spoonful of broth halfway to his mouth. "What did you say?" "Rissa." He said it again, clearer this time, his dark eyes locked on hers. Her throat tightened. No one had ever called her that, not even her family. But somehow, this dying child knew her name. By the end of the first week, the children's fevers had dropped entirely. By the second, they were sitting up. By the third, Aster laughed for the first time, a bright, startled sound that echoed through the nursery like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The servants noticed. and they were terrified. It's not natural, the head maid hissed one evening, cornering Nerissa in the hallway outside the nursery. Her name was Margot, and her face was sharp with suspicion. Those children were dying. Every healer, every physician, they all said the same thing. Weeks at most. They're getting better, Nerissa said carefully. Isn't that what matters? Better? Margot's laugh was bitter. Girl, if they die under your care, the Duke will have someone to blame. But if they live, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. He'll want to know how. And if he thinks you've done something unnatural, something forbidden. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Nerissa's stomach twisted. I haven't done anything, she said quietly. I'm just caring for them. Margot studied her with cold, calculating eyes. Then you'd better pray that's all it is. She turned and swept down the hall, leaving Nerissa alone in the flickering candlelight. Duke Cashin came to the nursery every day. He never announced himself, never knocked. He simply appeared in the doorway, silent as a shadow, and watched. At first, Nerissa thought he was checking on the children, but she soon realized he was watching her. His pale gray eyes followed her every movement, the way she tucked the blankets around Seelan's shoulders, the way she wiped Vero's face with a damp cloth, the way she hummed softly while braiding Aster's hair. He studied her hands, her voice, her touch, as if trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't understand. One afternoon, as Nerissa sang an old lullaby her grandmother had taught her, Cashin spoke from the doorway. Where did you learn that song? Nerissa's voice faltered. She glanced over her shoulder. He stood perfectly still, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. My grandmother, she said quietly. She used to sing it to me when I was small. What was it called? I don't know. She never said. His jaw tightened. Sing it again. It wasn't a request. Nerissa's pulse quickened, but she obeyed, her voice trembling as she repeated the melody, soft and lilting, words in a language she didn't fully understand. As she sang, something strange happened. The children's breathing synchronized. Aster's fingertips began to glow faintly, a soft golden light pulsing beneath his skin. Seelan murmured something in her sleep, words that sounded like prophecy. And Vero opened his eyes and stared directly at his father. Cashin went rigid. Nerissa stopped singing. The glow faded. The room fell silent. What are you? Cashin asked again, his voice rough, almost afraid. I don't know, Nerissa whispered. I haven't done anything. You've done something. He stepped into the room, his gaze boring into hers. Every healer who came before you failed. The children screamed at their touch. Fought them. Worsened under their care. But you. He gestured sharply toward the bed. You walk in, and within days they're thriving. Laughing. Glowing. I'm just a servant.
No.
His voice cut like a blade. You're not. Nerissa's breath hitched. Cashin stared at her for a long moment, his expression torn between suspicion and something deeper, something raw and desperate. Then he turned and left without another word. That night, Nerissa couldn't sleep. She sat beside the children, watching them breathe, her mind racing. What am I? She thought of her grandmother's stories, the ones about the starborn gift, an ancient magic said to flow through the blood of certain families. A power to heal, to soothe, to see what others could not. But those were just stories, weren't they? Restless, Nerissa rose and began tidying the nursery, folding blankets, straightening toys, organizing the medicine cabinet that had gone unused since her arrival. That's when she found it. Hidden behind a loose panel in the cabinet, a small wooden box, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. Her hands trembled as she lifted it out. Inside, wrapped in silk, were a few belongings, a locket, a pressed flower, a ribbon, and a letter. The handwriting was elegant but frantic, ink smudged in places as if the writer had been crying. Nerissa unfolded it, and her blood turned to ice. The letter read, "They are killing my children. I don't know who.
I don't know how.
But I feel it in my bones, in my blood. Something is draining them.
Poisoning them."
Cashin doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm mad with grief. But I am not mad. I am dying. And so are they. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. Please.
Stop them.
Alara Vaylor. Nerissa's hands shook. The Duchess hadn't died from childbirth complications. She'd been murdered. And something was still trying to kill her children. A soft voice whispered from the bed. Rissa. She turned. Aster sat up, his dark eyes wide and unfocused, glowing faintly in the dim light. They're coming, he whispered. Who's coming? Nerissa breathed. But Aster didn't answer. He simply stared past her, toward the shadows gathering in the corner of the room. And for the first time since arriving at Vaylor Estate, Nerissa felt true, bone-deep terror. Nerissa couldn't stop thinking about the letter. They are killing my children. She read it again and again by candlelight, tracing the desperate scrawl of Alara Vaylor's handwriting, searching for answers that weren't there. Who had the Duchess been afraid of? Why would anyone want her children dead? And most terrifying of all, was it still happening? Nerissa glanced at the triplets sleeping peacefully in their bed, their small bodies curled together like petals of a single flower. They were healthier now, stronger. But what if that wasn't enough? What if whoever killed the Duchess was waiting, watching, ready to finish what they'd started? She folded the letter carefully and tucked it beneath her pillow, then made a decision. She was going to find out the truth. The next morning, Nerissa began asking questions.
Quietly, carefully.
She started with the laundry maid, a nervous woman named Bess who'd worked at the estate for years. What was the Duchess like? Nerissa asked as they folded linens together in the dim washroom. Bess's hands stilled. Why do you want to know? I just wondered. The children looked so much like her portrait. Bess glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. She was kind, gentle. Not like most nobility, she actually spoke to us. Learned our names. Her expression darkened. That's why it was so strange. What was it? How she changed. Near the end, Bess shook her head. She got pale.
Weak.
I started having terrible headaches. The Duke brought in physicians, but none of them could figure out what was wrong. She hesitated. Some said it was normal for pregnancy. But I'd seen her pregnant before. Well, not her, but other ladies, and it wasn't like that. What do you mean? Bess leaned closer. She looked poisoned. Nerissa's heart skipped. But no one said that, Bess continued quickly. Not officially. The Duke was grieving, and after she died giving birth, everyone just accepted it. Who was with her? Nerissa asked. When she died?
The midwife.
Lady Corinth. A few servants. Bess frowned. Why are you asking all this? I'm just curious. Don't be. Bess's voice turned sharp. She grabbed Nerissa's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me, girl. People who ask too many questions in this house don't last long. The last maid, who went poking around the Duchess's things? Gone within a week. Said she was going home to family, but no one believed it. Nerissa's throat tightened. What happened to her? No one knows. And no one asks. Bess released her and turned back to the laundry, her movements stiff. If you're smart, you'll keep your head down and do your job. Nothing more. But Nerissa couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, she sought out anyone who might remember the Duchess's final months. A footman who'd served her meals went silent the moment she mentioned Alara's name, then requested a transfer to another estate the following morning. A chambermaid who'd cleaned the Duchess's rooms refused to speak at all, her face pale with fear. And the head cook, who'd prepared all of Alara's food, abruptly resigned without explanation. One by one, anyone Nerissa approached either vanished or fell silent. As if someone was watching. As if someone knew. Finally, Nerissa found the old midwife. Her name was Rowena, and she lived in a crumbling cottage on the edge of the estate grounds, long retired and half forgotten. Nerissa brought her a basket of bread and cheese, claiming she was running an errand for the kitchens. Rowena was small and hunched, her hands gnarled with age, her eyes clouded but sharp. She studied Nerissa for a long moment before stepping aside to let her in. The cottage smelled of herbs and smoke. Dried plants hung from the rafters, and strange symbols were carved into the wooden beams. "You're the new caretaker," Rowena said. It wasn't a question. Yes. "And the children are still alive. They're getting better." Rowena's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe relief. Impossible. Why? The old woman sank into a chair by the fire, her joints creaking. Because they were never meant to survive. Nerissa's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Rowena stared into the flames. "The Duchess was healthy before the birth.
Strong.
I delivered dozens of babies in my time. I knew what labor should look like." Her voice turned bitter. But that night something was wrong. She was sweating, convulsing, screaming things that made no sense. Her skin turned gray. Her eyes, she shuddered. "I've seen poison before, girl. I know what it looks like." "Did you tell anyone?" "I tried." Rowena's hands clenched. "I told the Duke. I told the physicians. But they didn't listen. They said I was old, that I didn't understand noble bloodlines, that complications happen." She looked up, her clouded eyes blazing. "But I knew. The Duchess didn't die of childbirth. She was murdered." Rowena nodded slowly. "And whoever did it made sure no one would believe me." Nerissa's mind raced. "The children, do they have the same symptoms?" "They did. Before you came." Rowena leaned forward. Fevers that wouldn't break. Trembling. Glowing eyes. Weak pulses. She paused. "Tell me, are they still showing signs?" Nerissa thought of Aster's glowing fingertips. Seelan's strange prophetic murmurs. Vero's unnaturally watchful gaze. "Yes," she whispered. "But different. Stronger." "Then whoever poisoned the Duchess is still trying to finish the job." Nerissa returned to the estate with her heart pounding. She went straight to the kitchens, watching carefully as meals were prepared for the nursery. She checked the water pitchers. The milk. The broth. Nothing seemed out of place. But that didn't mean it wasn't happening. That evening, as she was leaving the kitchens, a voice stopped her cold. "What exactly are you looking for?"
She spun around.
Duke Cashin stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression dark. "Your Grace, You've been asking questions," he said quietly. "About my wife." Nerissa's pulse hammered. "I didn't mean. You think I don't notice?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Servants fleeing. Whispers in the halls. And now you're inspecting the children's food like you expect to find something. I'm trying to help. By digging up the past." His jaw clenched. "By spreading rumors that my wife was murdered." "It's not a rumor." Nerissa's voice shook, but she forced herself to stand her ground. "The midwife said." "The midwife is a superstitious old woman." She was there. She saw. Enough. The word cracked through the air, like a whip. Cashin stepped closer, and Nerissa saw something she hadn't expected. His hands were trembling. "You will stop this investigation," he said, his voice tight. "You will stop asking questions. You will tend to the children, and nothing else. Do you understand? But if someone is still..." I said enough. His eyes burned with something raw and desperate, grief, rage, fear, all tangled together. Nerissa swallowed hard and nodded. Cashin stared at her for a moment longer, then turned and strode away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. But Nerissa noticed something. As he left, his hand brushed the wall to steady himself. And she realized the truth. He already knew. He'd always known. That night, Aster woke up screaming. Nerissa rushed to his side, pulling him into her arms as he sobbed against her chest. "Sure, it's all right," she murmured, stroking his hair. "I'm here." "Mama," he gasped. "Mama said." "What did she say, sweetheart?" His small hands clutched her nightgown, and when he looked up, his eyes were glowing faintly. "Someone wants us gone," he whispered. "Someone who lives here." A chill ran down Nerissa's spine. "Who?" But Aster only shook his head, tears streaming down his face. Nerissa held him tighter, her mind racing. "Someone who lives here." She glanced around the nursery, at the shadows pooling in the corners, the locked medicine cabinet, the neatly arranged shelves. And then she saw it. Something she'd missed before. a small vial tucked behind the other bottles in the cabinet, half hidden, unlabeled. Her heart stopped. Slowly, carefully, she set Aster down and crossed to the cabinet. She pulled out the vial and held it up to the candlelight. The liquid inside was clear, odorless. But when she tilted it, the faintest shimmer of silver swirled through it.
Moonsbane.
The forbidden poison. The same one that had killed the Duchess. And it was here, in the nursery, where the children slept. Nerissa's hands shook as the terrible truth settled over her like a shroud. The murderer wasn't some distant enemy. They were inside the house. Close enough to touch the children. Close enough to kill them whenever they wanted. And no one, not even the Duke, could stop them. It happened without warning. One moment, Vero was sitting quietly by the window, tracing patterns in the frost on the glass. The next, he crumpled to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Nerissa dropped the water pitcher she'd been holding. It shattered across the stone floor as she lunged forward, catching Vero's small body before his head struck the ground. Vero, his eyes rolled back. His limbs seized, muscles locking in violent spasms. Foam flecked his lips. No, no, no. Nerissa pressed her fingers to his throat, searching desperately for a pulse. It was there.
Barely.
Faint and fluttering like a dying bird. Help, she screamed toward the open door. Someone help. Aster and Seelan scrambled off the bed, their faces white with terror. Vero, Seelan sobbed, reaching for her brother. Nerissa pushed her back gently. Stay there, don't touch him. But Vero's convulsions worsened. His back arched. His small hands clawed at nothing. And then his breathing stopped. Chaos erupted. Servants flooded into the nursery, their screams echoing off the stone walls. He's dying. Get the physician. It's too late. Look at him. He's already gone. No. Nerissa's voice cracked like a whip. He's not dead. Get out. All of you, get out. But they didn't listen. They crowded closer, their faces twisted with panic and morbid curiosity, their voices rising into a cacophony of dread. One of the maids grabbed Aster, trying to pull him away. Come, child, you shouldn't see this. Aster fought her, screaming. Let me go, Rissa. Seelan collapsed to her knees, wailing. And Vero, sweet, silent Vero, lay limp in Nerissa's arms, his skin turning gray, his lips blue. No pulse. No breath.
No.
Nerissa's mind raced, desperation clawing at her chest. She'd seen this before, in her grandmother's cottage, years ago, when the neighbor's child had fallen through the ice and been pulled out cold and lifeless. Everyone had said it was too late, but her grandmother hadn't listened. She'd done something forbidden, something the village elders had whispered about in hushed, fearful tones after the child woke gasping and alive.
The soul bond.
Nerissa's hands trembled. She didn't know if she could do it. She'd only seen it once, and her grandmother had warned her. Never use this, Nerissa. It will mark you. It will change you. And once you begin, there is no turning back. But Vero was dying, and Nerissa wouldn't, let that happen. Everyone out, she roared, her voice raw with command. This time, something in her tone made them obey. The servants stumbled backward, fleeing into the hallway. Only Aster and Seelan remained, huddled together by the bed, their eyes wide and terrified. Nerissa looked at them. Stay there, she whispered. Don't move. No matter what happens, don't move. Then she turned back to Vero.
And began.
She laid him flat on the floor, pulled a small knife from her pocket, the one she used to cut herbs, and without hesitation, sliced across her palm. Blood welled hot and red. She pressed her bleeding hand against Vero's cold chest, directly over his heart, and began to chant. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, older than memory, woven into her bones by bloodlines she didn't fully understand. Breath to breath, bone to bone. Life for life, I claim my own. What was taken, I restore. Death shall pass through me before. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. You must mean it, Nerissa. Every word. Or it will consume you. She meant it. With every fiber of her being, she meant it. The air in the nursery shifted. A strange, crackling energy filled the room, raising the hairs on Nerissa's arms. Her palm began to burn, not with pain, but with heat, searing and intense, as if her blood had turned to liquid fire. And then, Vero gasped. His back arched. His eyes flew open, glowing brilliant gold. But he didn't breathe in. He breathed out. And with that exhale came something dark and writhing, black smoke that poured from his mouth, his nose, his skin, coiling through the air like living shadow. The poison, the sickness, the curse that had been killing him since birth. It spiraled upward and plunged into Nerissa. She screamed. The darkness hit her like a tidal wave, flooding her veins, burning through her chest, choking her lungs. She felt it clawing at her insides, trying to tear her apart from within.
But she didn't let go.
She held Vero's body against hers, her bleeding palms still pressed to his heart, and pulled. Take it, she thought desperately. Take it all, just let them live. The black smoke continued to pour out of Vero, and then, impossibly, from Aster and Seelen as well. All three children convulsed in unison, their small bodies glowing with golden light as the poison left them and flowed into Nerissa. She felt it filling her, every drop of sickness, every fragment of curse, every ounce of death that had been slowly killing them.
And she welcomed it.
Because they were breathing. For the first time since birth, all three of them were breathing freely, deeply, their chests rising and falling without effort. The golden light brightened. And then, all at once, it vanished. The children collapsed, unconscious but alive. And Nerissa crumpled to the floor.
Pain.
Unimaginable, searing pain. Nerissa's vision blurred. Her body burned from the inside out, fever raging through her like wildfire. She tried to move, but her limbs wouldn't obey. Tried to breathe, but her lungs felt full of thorns. Somewhere far away, she heard voices. Rissa. Don't die. Please. Small hands touched her face.
Cool.
Trembling. She forced her eyes open. Aster, Seelen, and Vero knelt around her, their faces streaked with tears, their eyes, no longer fevered, no longer dying, filled with terror. Don't leave us, Aster whispered, his voice breaking. Seelen clutched Nerissa's hand. You saved us. You can't go. Vero said nothing. But he pressed his small forehead against hers, and she felt something pass between them. Gratitude, love, connection. The soul bond. It worked. They were alive. And Nerissa was dying in their place. The door slammed open. Heavy footsteps thundered across the floor. What happened? Duke Cashin's voice cut off abruptly. Nerissa couldn't see him clearly. Her vision was fading, but she felt his presence, large and looming, as he dropped to his knees beside her. What did you do? He demanded, his voice raw. She tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. Aster turned to his father, tears streaming down his face. She saved us, Papa. She saved us. Cashin's gaze snapped to his children, and froze, because for the first time in 3 years, they looked healthy. No fever, no trembling, no labored breathing. Their skin was warm and flushed with life. Their eyes were clear. They were well. Cashin's hands shook as he reached out, touching Aster's forehead, Seelen's cheek, Vero's wrist, as if afraid they would shatter at his touch. How his voice broke. But before anyone could answer, a scream echoed from the hallway.
Sharp. Panicked.
Accusatory. The maid killed the children with dark magic. Footsteps thundered closer. The steward, Lord Harwin, the estate's highest-ranking official, burst into the nursery, his face twisted with rage and horror. Seize her, he roared, pointing at Nerissa's crumpled form. She's used forbidden sorcery. She's killed the Duke's heirs. They're alive, Cashin snarled, his voice like thunder. Harwin stopped short, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. The children, healthy and whole, clustered protectively around the dying girl on the floor. Impossible, he breathed. She saved them, Cashin said quietly, his voice shaking. She gave her life for theirs. Harwin's expression darkened. Then she's admitted to using blood magic. Forbidden magic. He straightened, his voice turning cold and formal. By the laws of Arnemeyer, she must be tried and executed. No! Aster threw himself across Nerissa's body, his small arms spread wide. Celan and Vero did the same, forming a barrier between her and the steward. You won't touch her, Aster screamed. Cashin stared at his children, at their fierce, desperate faces, and something inside him shattered. He looked down at Nerissa. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin is burning with fever. She'd done the impossible. She'd saved his children. And now she was going to die for it. Unless... Cashin rose to his full height, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Call the healer, he commanded.
Now.
Your Grace. She used forbidden. I don't care. Cashin's eyes blazed. If she dies, my children die with her. The bond is formed. She is theirs now. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room. And I will burn this entire estate to the ground before I let anyone harm her. Silence. Harwin stared at him, mouth agape. And in the hallway beyond, the whispers began. Dark magic. The Duke has gone mad. She's bewitched him. But Cashin didn't care. He knelt beside Nerissa and carefully lifted her into his arms. Her head lolled against his chest. Her blood stained his shirt. And for the first time in 3 years, Duke Cashinvaler felt something other than grief. He felt hope. Nerissa woke to the sound of chains. Not her own, though she soon realized heavy iron shackles bound her wrists to the bed frame. No, these were distant, echoing. The rhythmic clank of guards marching through stone corridors. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her body, sharp and merciless, as if every nerve had been set ablaze. The fever still raged beneath her skin, though it had dulled from the apocalyptic inferno of before to a persistent, gnawing burn. She was alive.
Barely.
Don't move. The voice was quiet, feminine, and unfamiliar. Nerissa turned her head slowly and found a woman sitting beside the bed, middle-aged, dressed in healer's robes, her face lined with exhaustion. Where? Nerissa's voice came out as a rasp. The Duke's private chambers, the healer said, checking Nerissa's pulse with practiced efficiency. He had you moved here after you collapsed. Said no one was to touch you except me. The children.
Alive. Healthy.
Driving the servants mad with questions about you. A hint of a smile touched the healer's lips. Whatever you did, girl, it worked. Their fevers are gone. Their strength is returning. In 3 days, they've improved more than in 3 years. 3 days. Nerissa had been unconscious for 3 days. But the healer's expression darkened. You should know. The estate is in chaos. Half the household thinks you're a saint. The other half thinks you're a witch. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. And Lord Harwin has called for a tribunal. He's demanding you stand trial for the use of forbidden magic. Nerissa's heart sank. When? Today. At sundown. The healer's jaw tightened. The Duke has been fighting him, but Harwin invoked the old laws. He has the right to demand judgment. She paused. If they find you guilty, the sentence is death. They came for her as the sun began to set. For guards, their faces impassive, unlocked her shackles and hauled her to her feet. Nerissa's legs nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stand. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall. They led her through the estate, not to the great hall, as she'd expected, but to the chapel, a cold, austere space of stone and shadow, lit only by rows of flickering candles. The pews were filled. Servants, nobles, merchants from the nearby town, all crammed together, their faces a mixture of fear, curiosity, and anticipation. At the front, seated on a raised dais, sat 3 figures. Lord Harwin, the steward, his expression smug and calculating. Lady Corinth, a sharp-faced noblewoman Nerissa vaguely recognized as the Duchess's former lady-in-waiting. And Duke Cashinvaler. He sat perfectly still, his face carved from stone, his gray eyes locked on Nerissa as she was dragged down the aisle. She couldn't read his expression. Didn't know if he was there to condemn her or save her. The guards forced her to her knees in the center of the chapel. Lord Harwin rose, his voice ringing out across the gathered crowd. "We are here to pass judgment on the girl known as Nerissa, formerly of the Lower Marches, currently employed as caretaker to the Duke's children." He paused dramatically. "She stands accused of practicing forbidden blood magic, of performing a soul bond, an act outlawed by the crown for over 2 centuries, and of endangering the lives of noble children through unnatural means." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nerissa kept her head high. "How do you plead?" Harwin demanded. She met his gaze steadily. "I saved their lives." "That is not an answer." "It's the only answer that matters." Harwin's face flushed with anger. "You admit, then, to using blood magic?" "I admit to doing what no one else would do." Nerissa's voice rang clear despite her exhaustion. "I admit to refusing to let 3 innocent children die when I had the power to save them." Power. Lady Corinth's voice was sharp as a blade. She rose from her seat, her eyes glittering with malice. "You are a peasant girl, a purchased servant. Where, exactly, did you acquire such power?" Nerissa hesitated. She didn't know how to answer that. Her grandmother had never explained where the gift came from, only that it ran in their blood, passed down through generations of women whose names had been forgotten by history. "I don't know," she said finally. "You don't know?" Corinth laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "How convenient. The girl performs a ritual so dangerous it was banned by royal decree, and she claims ignorance. I didn't know it was forbidden. Ignorance of the law is not a defense." Harwin stepped forward, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet. "The soul bond is forbidden for a reason. It ties lives together in ways that cannot be undone. It creates dependencies, obsessions." His eyes narrowed. "Tell me, girl, now that you've bound yourself to the Duke's children, what is to stop you from controlling them? From bending them to your will?" "I would never." "What is to stop you from using them as hostages? From leveraging their lives for power, wealth, position?" "That's not." "What is to stop you," Harwin said, his voice rising, "from doing exactly what someone did to the Duchess?" The chapel fell deathly silent. Nerissa's blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" Harwin smiled coldly. "You think we don't know? You've been asking questions, digging into the Duchess's death, spreading vile rumors that she was murdered." He turned to address the crowd. "This girl has been sowing discord and suspicion since the day she arrived. And now, conveniently, she has made herself indispensable to the Duke's heirs. One wonders what her true motives are." "My motive was to save their lives, or to bind them to you forever," Corinth said smoothly. "To ensure your position, your survival." She tilted her head. "After all, you were nothing before you came here. A debt slave, worthless. But now—" She gestured around the chapel. "Now you are the subject of tribunals, the focus of the Duke's attention, the so-called savior of House Valor." Nerissa's hands clenched into fists. "I didn't ask for any of this. And yet you have it." "Enough." The single word cut through the chapel like a sword strike. Duke Cashin rose from his seat. Every eye turned to him. He descended from the dais slowly, his boots echoing against stone, and walked to where Nerissa knelt. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he turned to face Harwin and Corinth. "You accuse this girl of using forbidden magic to control my children," he said quietly. "But I have spent 3 days watching them, listening to them. And do you know what I have learned?" Silence. "They chose her," Cashin said. "Not through compulsion, not through sorcery, but because she was the only person in this entire estate who treated them like they mattered, who fought for them when everyone else, myself included, had given up." His voice grew harder. "You want to talk about the soul bond? Fine. Yes, it is dangerous. Yes, it creates connections that cannot be severed. But it also requires something you clearly don't understand: sacrifice." He gestured toward Nerissa. This girl gave her life force to save my children. She took their poison into her own body, knowing it could kill her. And you dare stand here and accuse her of ambition?" Harwin's jaw tightened. "Your Grace, the law." "The law," Cashin interrupted, his voice like iron, "was written to prevent the abuse of power, not to punish acts of mercy." "Mercy?" Corinth's voice dripped with disdain. "Your Grace, you are blinded by gratitude. This girl has bewitched you." "Careful, Lady Corinth. What are you suggesting?" Nerissa's blood turned to ice. "There are facilities," Corinth said carefully. "Academies for children with unusual gifts. Far from here. They would be cared for.
Trained.
And you would be free to— Free to what? Forget them? Free to live." Corinth's voice turned passionate. "To rebuild. To honor Alara's memory by securing House Vaylor's future rather than watching it crumble around three cursed." The sound of a hand slamming against wood echoed through the study. "Get out." Cashin's voice was deadly quiet. "Your Grace." "I said get out." Footsteps. The study door flew open. Corinth swept into the hallway and stopped dead when she saw Nerissa standing there. For a heartbeat, neither woman moved. Then Corinth's expression shifted. The mask of concern melted away, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Eavesdropping, girl," she said softly. "How unbecoming. I know what you did." Nerissa's voice shook, but she held Corinth's gaze. "I know you killed the Duchess." Corinth's smile was razor-thin. "Careful. Accusations like that could be considered treason. The moon's bane in the nursery. The servants who disappeared. The way you've tried to turn the Duke against his own children." Nerissa stepped forward. "You wanted them dead. All of them. So you could what? Marry him yourself? Control House Vaylor. You have quite the imagination." "You poisoned Alara Vaylor," Nerissa said, her voice rising. "And when that didn't kill the children, you kept trying. For 3 years, you've been slowly murdering them. Prove it." The challenge hung in the air. Nerissa opened her mouth and realized she couldn't. The vial was gone. She'd hidden it, but when she checked after the tribunal, it had vanished. The letter from the Duchess was gone too, taken from beneath her pillow while she'd been unconscious. Every piece of evidence had been erased. Corinth's smile widened. "That's what I thought." She turned to leave and found Duke Cashin standing in the doorway. His face was carved from stone. His eyes blazed with something terrible. "Repeat what you just said," he ordered, his voice like winter itself. "About my wife." Corinth's composure cracked. "Your Grace, the girl is delusional. She asked you to prove her wrong." Cashin stepped into the hallway. "So prove it. Tell me you didn't poison Alara." "This is absurd. Tell me you haven't been trying to kill my children. I have served this house faithfully for 15 years. Tell me." Cashin roared. The walls seemed to shake. Corinth stumbled backward, her face pale. "I loved her," Cashin said, his voice breaking. "I loved Alara more than my own life. And you stood beside her, held her hand, watched her die." His hands clenched into fists. "If I find out you had any part in her death." "You won't." Corinth's voice turned icy. "Because there's no proof. No witnesses. Nothing but the ravings of a peasant girl who's bewitched you into doubting everyone around you." She straightened her gown, her mask of composure settling back into place. "I will be leaving in the morning, Your Grace. Clearly, my presence here is no longer welcome." Her eyes flickered to Nerissa. "But mark my words, that girl will destroy you. And when she does, don't say you weren't warned." She swept past them both, disappearing down the darkened corridor. Cashin stood frozen, staring after her. "She did it," Nerissa whispered. "I know she did." "I know." Nerissa's head snapped up. "Then why?" "Because she's right." Cashin's voice was hollow. "There's no proof. And without it, I can't touch her. Her family is too powerful. If I accuse her without evidence, it will start a war between houses. But the children will be safe." He turned to her, his expression fierce. I'll have her watch. Every moment. Every movement. If she so much as looks at my children wrong. A scream shattered the night. High-pitched. Terrified. A child's scream. Cashin and Nerissa ran. They burst into the nursery to find chaos. Seelan was sobbing, pressed against the far wall. Aster stood in front of her, his small hands glowing with golden light, his face twisted in fury. And Vero stood in the center of the room, his eyes blazing pure white, frost spreading across the floor in jagged patterns. In his small hand he held a dagger. And kneeling before him, her face white with terror, was one of the chambermaids. She tried to put something in our water, Aster said, his voice shaking. Vero saw her. Cashin crossed the room in 3 strides and wrenched the pitcher from the maid's hands. He held it up to the lamplight. The water shimmered faintly with that telltale silver sheen. Moonsbane. Who gave this to you? Cashin demanded. The maid's lips trembled. I don't. Vero raised the dagger. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Lady Corinth, the maid sobbed. She paid me, said it was medicine, said the children needed it to sleep. I didn't know. Where is she now? The stables. She was leaving tonight. She said to do it now before. Cashin didn't wait to hear the rest. He turned and ran. The stables were dark and silent. But a single lamp burned in the tack room, and Cashin could hear the sound of a horse being readied. He stepped inside. Lady Corinth looked up from cinching a saddle, her expression flickering through surprise, calculation, and finally settling on cold defiance. Come to see me off, Your Grace? The maid confessed, Cashin said quietly. Corinth's hands stilled. Confess to what? To try to poison my children. On your orders. The word of a servant against a lady of the court? Corinth laughed bitterly. You truly have fallen far, Cashin. Why?
His voice cracked.
Illyra trusted you. Loved you like a sister. Why would you kill her? For a long moment, Corinth said nothing. Then she turned to face him fully, and all pretense vanished. Because she was weak, Corinth said flatly. Because she wasted the power of House Valor on charity and kindness and love. She spat the word like a curse. I spent 15 years watching her squander every opportunity, every alliance, every chance to make this house truly great. So you murdered her. I freed you. Corinth's eyes blazed. From a woman who would have destroyed you with her softness. And from children who never should have been born. They are my children. They are abominations. Corinth's voice turned shrill. Cursed. Unnatural. Illyra knew it. I saw it in her eyes those final days. She knew something was wrong with them. And when she died, I thought, finally, you would be free. Free to what? To marry you. Corinth's silence was answer enough. Cashin's hands shook with rage. You killed the woman I loved. Tried to murder my children. All because you thought, what? That I would turn to you. You would have. Corinth's voice turned desperate. Eventually. Once they were gone. Once you had no choice. I would have been here. Patient. Loyal. Everything she wasn't. Everything she wasn't. Cashin's laugh was broken glass. You're right. You're nothing like her. Illyra was kind.
Brave.
Good. His voice dropped to a whisper. And you are a monster. Corinth's face twisted. Her hand moved to her belt and came up holding a vial of shimmering silver liquid. If I can't have you, she hissed, no one will. She hurled the vial. It shattered at Cashin's feet, liquid splashing across his boots.
Moonsbane.
Enough to kill a man in minutes through skin contact alone. Cashin staggered backward, but before the poison could seep through his clothing, light exploded through the stable. Golden. Brilliant. Blinding. 3 small figures stood in the doorway. Aster, Seelan, and Vero, their eyes glowing, their hands outstretched, power crackling around them like lightning. The poison on the ground began to move, drawn away from Cashin as if pulled by invisible hands. It gathered into a sphere, suspended in midair. And then, with a gesture from Vero, it flew across the stable, directly at Lady Corinth. she screamed. The poison splashed across her gown, her hands, her face. She clawed at her skin, gasping, choking, and collapsed. The children lowered their hands. The light faded. Cashin stood frozen, staring at his children, at their small, fierce faces, still glowing faintly with residual power. "Papa," Aster whispered. "Are you hurt?" Cashin couldn't speak. He dropped his knees and pulled all 3 children into his arms, holding them so tightly they gasped. "You saved me," he breathed. "My brave, brilliant children, you saved me." Behind them, Nerissa stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. And on the ground, Lady Corinth lay still, her eyes wide and empty, killed by the same poison she'd used to destroy so many others. The official story was simple. Lady Corinth, overcome with guilt for her role in the Duchess's death, had taken her own life using the same poison she'd administered 3 years prior. The truth was far more complicated. But Cashin was a duke, and he knew how to control a narrative. Within days, investigators from the Crown arrived. They found the hidden cache of Moon's Bane in Corinth's chambers. Letters detailing payments to servants. A journal outlining her obsession with Cashin and her growing desperation to eliminate anyone who stood in her way. The case was closed. House Valor was cleared of all suspicion. And Nerissa became the subject of whispers throughout the kingdom, the mysterious girl who had saved the Duke's cursed children and exposed a murderer. But she didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted. A week after Corinth's death, Nerissa stood in the nursery, watching the children sleep. They looked peaceful now. Healthy. Their cheeks flushed with color, their breathing deep and even. But she could still see the faint glow beneath their skin when they dreamed. The power that had saved their father's life. The power that was growing stronger every day. "They frighten you." Nerissa spun around. Cashin stood in the doorway, still dressed in his formal clothes from the day's meetings. He looked exhausted, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his shoulders sagged with the weight of everything he'd endured. But there was something different about him now. The hollow emptiness that had haunted his gaze for 3 years was gone. "I'm not frightened," Nerissa said quietly. "I'm concerned." Cashin stepped into the room, moving to stand beside her. Together, they watched the sleeping children. "Their power is awakening faster than I expected," Nerissa continued. "The soul bond accelerated it, connected them not just to me, but to each other. They're learning to share their gifts, amplify them." She hesitated. "I don't know how to control it, how to teach them." "Neither do I." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Cashin spoke again, his voice softer. "My wife, she knew. Toward the end. She told me the children were special, that they would change the world." His jaw tightened. "I thought she was delirious from the pain. But she wasn't, was she?" "No," Nerissa whispered. "She wasn't." "What are they, Nerissa?" It was the first time he'd used her name. The intimacy of its scent and unexpected warmth through her chest. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "But my grandmother used to tell stories. About the starborn, people born under certain celestial alignments, touched by ancient magic." She gestured toward the children. "Their birth, it was during the celestial convergence, when all 3 moons aligned." "I remember." Cashin's voice was rough. "Ilara went into labor the moment the first moon rose. She said it felt like the sky was pulling them out of her. That kind of birth leaves a mark. A gift." Nerissa turned to face him. "Your children aren't cursed, Your Grace. They're blessed." And that blessing nearly killed them because someone tried to poison it out of their blood. Cashin's hands clenched. "Corinth. Yes. But you saved them." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Nerissa's breath caught. "You gave them your life. Bound yourself to them forever. Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Nerissa could have said it was duty, or desperation, or simple human decency. But standing there in the lamplight, with 3 sleeping children between them and the ghost of his dead wife haunting the corners of the room, she told the truth. Because no one deserves to die alone and unloved. Especially not children. Something shifted in Cashin's expression. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. What did you expect?
Someone temporary.
Replaceable. He shook his head. Instead, you're... He trailed off, as if searching for the right words. You're the reason they're alive. The reason I'm alive. The reason this house still stands. You give me too much credit. I don't give you nearly enough. The intensity in his voice made Nerissa's heart race. Cashin took a step closer.
I've been cruel to you, he said.
Suspicious.
Cold.
I treated you like a servant when you were saving my children's lives. You were grieving. That's no excuse. His gray eyes held hers. You deserved better. You deserve better. Nerissa's throat tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying. Cashin hesitated, vulnerability flickering across his face. I'm saying I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be anything other than what I've been for 3 years, a ghost in my own house. But you... He gestured helplessly. You make me want to try. To live again. To be the father my children need. The man Alara would have wanted me to be. Tears pricked Nerissa's eyes. I'm not trying to replace her, she said quickly. I would never. I know. Cashin's voice was gentle. And I'm not asking you to. I'm just... He exhaled slowly. I'm asking if you'll stay. Not as a servant. Not as hired help. But as part of this family. Nerissa's breath caught. Your Grace. Cashin. His voice was rough.
Please.
Just. Cashin. The informality felt dangerous. Intimate. Like crossing a line they could never uncross. But Nerissa found herself wanting to cross it anyway. I'll stay, she whispered. For as long as you need me. What if I need you forever? The question was barely audible. But it struck Nerissa like lightning. Before she could respond, a small voice interrupted. Rissa? They both turned. Seelan sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes sleepily. I had a dream. Nerissa crossed to her immediately, kneeling beside the bed. What kind of dream, sweetheart? A good one. Seelan smiled, still half asleep. Mama was there. She said to tell Papa. Her eyes drifted to her father. She said it's okay to be happy again. Cashin went very still. She said Rissa makes the house warm. Seelan continued yawning. Like sunlight. And we should keep her forever. Then she curled back into her blankets and fell asleep. Nerissa's hands trembled. She didn't dare look at Cashin. Didn't dare hope that what she'd just heard meant what she thought it meant. But then she felt his hand on her shoulder. Warm, steady, real. Stay, he said again. Please. And this time, Nerissa heard what he wasn't saying. Not just for the children. For me. She turned, meeting his gaze. And nodded. The next morning, Cashin made an announcement to the household. Nerissa was no longer a servant. She was to be given rooms in the family wing. A stipend. A title. Lady Caretaker of House Valor. The servants whispered. The nobles questioned. But when the Duke's children clung to her during meals, laughed at her stories, and called her Rissa with such open affection, no one dared challenge it. And when Cashin began taking his meals with them instead of alone in his study, when he started smiling again, when the shadows finally began to lift from House Valor, people stopped asking questions and started hoping. That night, Nerissa stood on her balcony, looking out over the estate grounds. The gardens were still overgrown, the towers still wind-battered, but somehow it felt different, like a house waking up after a long, dark sleep. Behind her, she heard the door open. The children wanted me to give you this. Cashin stood in the doorway, holding a small wooden box. Nerissa took it carefully and opened it. Inside was a bracelet, simple, handmade, woven from colored threads. They made it themselves, Cashin said. Said you needed something to remind you that you belong here. Nerissa's vision blurred with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Cashin stepped closer, until they stood side by side in the moonlight. No, he said quietly. Thank you.
For everything. For them.
For... He paused. For me. Nerissa looked up at him, and saw not the silent Duke. Not the grief-stricken widower, but a man, complex, broken, healing. A man looking at her like she was something precious. "Cashin," she breathed. He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather-light. "Is this?" He swallowed. "Is this all right?" Nerissa's heart was hammered. She knew this was dangerous. Knew that crossing this line would change everything. But she also knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd already crossed it. The moment she'd given her life for his children. The moment she'd chosen to stay. "Yes," she whispered. And when Cashin leaned down, slowly, carefully, and pressed his lips to her forehead, gentle as a prayer, Nerissa finally understood what it meant to belong. The poison worked fast. Too fast. Nerissa collapsed in the corridor outside the children's room, her legs giving out beneath her as fire spread through her veins. She gasped, clawing at her throat, unable to breathe, unable to scream. Someone had finally made their move. And this time they hadn't failed. "Nerissa." Cashin's voice seemed to come from very far away, though she felt his hands on her face and heard the raw panic in his tone. "Get the healer, now," he roared at someone. "And find out what she ate, what she drank, move." But Nerissa already knew.
The tea.
The chamomile tea that had been waiting in her room when she'd returned from evening prayers with the children. She'd thought it was kindness from one of the kitchen staff. It had been an execution. Her vision blurred. The soul bond flared to life inside her chest, not gentle, but violent, pulling at her life force, trying desperately to anchor her to the world. But the poison was stronger. She felt it severing the threads one by one. Felt herself slipping away. And somewhere in the distance, she heard the children screaming. "No, no, and oh." Aster's voice cracked with terror as he, Celine, and Vero burst into the hallway. They threw themselves down beside Nerissa, their small hands glowing desperately as they tried to push healing energy into her. But it wasn't working. "Rissa, please." Celine sobbed. "Don't leave us." Vero's eyes blazed white, frost spreading across the floor in jagged, panicked patterns as he tried to freeze the poison in her blood. Nothing worked. The poison was designed specifically to counter starborn magic. Someone had studied them. "I planned this, Your Grace." The healer arrived, breathless and pale. She knelt beside Nerissa, checked her pulse, her pupils, the grayish tinge spreading across her skin. Then she looked up at Cashin, and her expression said everything. "How long?" Cashin's voice was deadly calm.
"Minutes.
Perhaps less." The healer's hands shook. Its shadows veil, a poison crafted to kill those with magical bonds. Once it enters the bloodstream, there's no antidote.
I'm
sorry, Your Grace."
No.
The single word rang with absolute authority. Cashin turned to the healer, his gray eyes blazing. "The life exchange. It can be done, can it?" The healer's face went white. "Your Grace, that ritual, it's forbidden for a reason." "The cost." "I don't care about the cost. You could die." "I said I don't care." Cashin's voice was steel. "Tell me how to do it." "Papa, no." Aster grabbed his father's arm. "You can't." "I can." Cashin knelt, taking his son's face in his hands. "And I will. Because she gave her life for you. All of you. And I will not let her die, because of it." He looked at all three children, at their tear-streaked faces, their glowing eyes, their desperate fear. "Your mother told me once that love is not measured in words, but in what you're willing to sacrifice." His voice cracked. "Nerissa sacrificed everything for you.
For me.
For this family. And I will not fail her now." He turned back to the healer. "Tell me what to do." The life exchange was ancient magic. Older than the starborn gifts. Older than kingdoms. It required blood, will, and a bond strong enough to bridge two souls. The healer sketched the ritual circle in chalk around Nerissa's body, her hands trembling as she drew symbols that hadn't been used in centuries. "You'll need to open a vein," she said quietly. "Press your blood to hers. And speak the words of binding." She handed Cashin a small blade. He took it without hesitation. Your Grace, the healer whispered, if the bond isn't strong enough, if your will falters even for a moment, the ritual will consume you both. You'll die together. Cashin looked down at Nerissa, at the woman who had walked into his house a nameless servant and become the reason his children still breathed. The woman who had challenged him, defied him, forced him to feel again when all he'd wanted was numbness. The woman he'd slowly, impossibly, fallen in love with. The bond is strong enough, he said, and cut his palm. Blood welled crimson and hot. Cashin pressed his hand to Nerissa's chest, directly over her heart, and began to chant in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. The words came from somewhere deep and primal, from the same place the soul bond had been forged. Life for life, breath for breath. I stand between you and death. Take what I have, take what I am. By blood and will, I make this stand. Light exploded from his palm. Golden, brilliant, blinding. Cashin felt his life force pouring out of him like water through a shattered dam, rushing into Nerissa, flooding her veins, pushing back against the poison with pure, desperate will. The pain was extraordinary, like being torn apart and remade all at once. He could feel the poison fighting back, could feel it trying to consume them both. And then the children joined the circle. Aster, Selin, and Vero placed their small hands on their father's shoulders, and their starborn power flared to life. Not just their individual gifts, but something greater. Something combined. The three children's power merged, amplified by the soul bond they shared with Nerissa, and channeled through their father's desperate love. The light intensified until it was almost unbearable. And deep within Nerissa's poisoned body, something shifted. The shadow's veil, designed to kill magic, met something it hadn't been prepared for. Not just magic, not just willpower,
but love.
Raw, absolute, unbreakable love. And it shattered. The poison burned away like morning mist. Cashin felt the moment Nerissa's heart steadied, felt her lungs expand with breath, felt her soul anchor itself back to the world. The light began to fade. He collapsed forward, barely catching himself before he crushed her. Papa. Selin's voice was high with fear, but Cashin was already laughing, a broken, relieved sound. I'm all right, he gasped. Nerissa's eyes opened. For a moment, she just stared up at him, confused and disoriented. Then awareness flooded back, and she gasped. The poison. Gone. Cashin's voice was hoarse. You're safe. The children.
Safe.
All of us. Because of you. Tears spilled down Nerissa's cheeks. You saved me. You saved us first. Their eyes held. And in that moment, with the children gathered around them and golden light still shimmering in the air, something unspoken passed between them. A promise. A future.
A choice.
But the moment shattered when footsteps thundered down the corridor. Guards burst into the hallway, dragging a struggling figure between them. Lord Halden, Corinth's younger brother, a minor nobleman Cashin had barely noticed in all the chaos. We found him trying to flee through the servants' passage, Your Grace, the captain reported. And we found this in his chambers. He held up a vial of shimmering black liquid. Shadow's veil. Halden's face twisted with rage and fear. You have no proof. We have your correspondence with your sister, the captain interrupted. Letters detailing the entire plot. How she would eliminate the Duchess and the children. How you would ensure the Duke remarried appropriately, to someone your family could control. Lies. How you panicked when the Maid survived and exposed Corinth. The captain's voice turned hard. How you decided to finish what your sister started. Cashin rose slowly to his feet. Every guard in the hallway stepped back. Because the silent Duke, the man who had spent 3 years drowning in grief, was gone. In his place stood something far more dangerous. A father. A protector. A man who had just fought death itself to save the woman he loved. You tried to murder her, Cashin said quietly. In my house. Under my protection. She's just a servant. She is the reason my children live. Cashin's voice dropped to something lethal. She is the savior of House Valor. And you, He stepped closer, and Halden shrank back. "Are a dead man." "Your Grace, please, I can explain." "Explain it to the executioner." Halden's face went white. "You can't, my family. Your family conspired to murder a duchess and 3 innocent children." Cashin's eyes blazed. "Your sister died by her own poison. You will die by the crown's justice. Publicly. So everyone knows what happens to those who threaten House Valor." He turned to the guards. "Take him." Halden screamed as he was dragged away, but Cashin had already dismissed him from his mind. He knelt beside Nerissa again, helping her sit up carefully. "Can you stand?" "I think so." He supported her weight as she rose, the children clustering close, their hands clutching at her dress. "It's over," Cashin said quietly. "The conspiracy, the poison, all of it. You're safe now." Nerissa looked at him, at this man who had given his life force to save hers, and felt something shift deep in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." He said it with such fierce sincerity that it took her breath away. "For everything. For giving me my children back. For giving me a reason to live again." Before Nerissa could respond, Aster tugged on his father's sleeve. "Papa? What happens now?" Cashin looked at his son, then at his other children, then at Nerissa, and made a decision. 3 days later, the great hall of Valor Estate was packed. Nobles from across the kingdom had gathered, summoned by urgent decree. Merchants, scholars, military commanders, all crammed into the vast space, murmuring anxiously about what the Duke might announce. Nerissa stood off to the side, uncomfortable in the formal gown Cashin had insisted she wear. The children stood with her, dressed in their finest clothes, their faces solemn. Then Cashin entered. The room fell silent. He walked to the raised dais, his presence commanding absolute attention, and turned to face the crowd. 3 months ago, he said, his voice carrying across the hall, my children were dying. Every healer, every physician, every expert in the kingdom had given up hope.
He paused.
And then a girl arrived. A servant purchased 3 silver coins. A nobody from the lower marches with no education, no title, no power. Nerissa's cheeks burned as every eye turned toward her. This girl, Nerissa, did what no one else could do. She saved my children's lives through an act of incredible sacrifice and courage. She uncovered a conspiracy that had murdered my wife and nearly destroyed my house. And when assassins came for her, she faced them without fear. Cashin's voice grew stronger. I stand before you today not as a man in mourning, but as a father grateful beyond measure. And I make this declaration before the kingdom. He gestured, and Nerissa was gently pushed forward by servants until she stood beside him on the dais. Nerissa is no longer a servant. She is not a maid. She is the savior of Varnamire. He turned to her, his gray eyes intense. She is guardian to my children, protector of this house, and a lady of House Valor in her own right. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Furthermore, Cashin continued, raising his voice over the murmurs, the conspiracy that claimed my wife's life has been fully exposed and punished. Lady Alara Valor's name is cleared of all false rumors. She was murdered by those who sought to control this house. But they failed. He looked at his children, at Aster, Selin, and Vero standing proud and healthy. Because of one girl's impossible courage, House Valor stands. Cashin pulled a ribbon from his pocket, the formal symbol of noble adoption. And in front of the entire kingdom, he tied it around Nerissa's wrist. Rise, Lady Nerissa Valor.
Guardian.
Protector. Family. Tears streamed down Nerissa's face as the hall erupted. Some cheered. Some whispered. But all bore witness to the maid who became a legend. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the children had finally been coaxed to bed, Nerissa stood in the gardens. Snow had begun to fall, the first of the season, dusting the overgrown paths with white. They'll need proper tutors now, a voice said behind her. She turned. Cashin stood at the garden entrance, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. The children, he clarified, moving closer. Their powers are growing. They'll need training. Guidance. I'll help however I can, Nerissa said. I know. He stopped beside her, both of them watching the snow fall. But I wasn't just talking about magic lessons. Nerissa looked at him questioningly. Cashin's expression was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. They need stability.
Love.
A family that won't abandon them.
He paused.
I need that too. Nerissa's breath caught. I loved my wife, Cashin said quietly. I always will. But Alara is gone. And holding on to grief was killing me, killing my ability to be the father my children needed. He turned to face Nerissa fully. You gave me more than my children's lives. You gave me a reason to live again. Cashin. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, he said quickly. I needed you to know that you're not just a guardian or a protector, or even just a family. His voice dropped to something raw. You're the person I think about when I wake. The voice I listen for. The future I want. Nerissa's heart was hammered. I'm still just a girl from the lower marches, she whispered.
No.
Cashin's smile was gentle. You're the woman who saved a kingdom. Before Nerissa could respond, delighted shrieks echoed from the gardens. They both turned. Aster, Selin, and Vero had escaped their nursemaid and were running through the snow, laughing, glowing faintly with golden light, their faces alight with pure joy.
Healthy. Alive. Free.
They're supposed to be in bed, Cashin said, but he was smiling. Let them play, Nerissa said softly. They've earned it. They stood together, watching the children, watching this impossible family they'd built from sacrifice and courage and desperate hope. And when Cashin's hand found Nerissa's, their fingers intertwining naturally, she didn't pull away.
Thank you, he said again.
For all of it.
For them. For me.
For giving us a future. Nerissa looked up at him, at this man who had fought death itself to save her, and felt something settle into place. Like coming home. Thank you for letting me stay, she whispered. And as snow fell around them and the children's laughter filled the air, Duke Cashin Valor leaned down and kissed her. Gentle, reverent, full of promise. A new beginning, built on impossible courage, and bound by a love that had conquered poison, conspiracy, and death itself. Epilogue. 6 months later. The wedding was simple. Not because House Valor lacked resources, but because Nerissa had insisted. I don't need spectacle, she'd told Cashin. I just need you. So they were married in the chapel where she'd once been tried for witchcraft, a deliberate choice, a reclaiming of that space. The children served as attendants, their starborn gifts carefully controlled, but still glowing faintly with happiness. And when Cashin lifted Nerissa's veil and saw tears streaming down her face, he smiled. No more crying, he murmured. Happy tears, she promised.
Good.
He kissed her forehead. Because this is just the beginning. And it was. The beginning of a legend. Of the maid who saved a kingdom. The children who carried starlight in their veins. And the duke who learned that love, real, sacrificial, impossible love, was the most powerful magic of all.